How many interviews have you done?
I haven't done any for about 20 years.
Okay, so not on this subject at all.
No.
How old are you?
43.
You're a year younger than me. When are you 44?
November.
Just after my birthday. It's about a year older.
Yeah. We're both 70s babies.
Yeah, 78. We got to live through the brilliance of the 80s as a little kid, and then the 90s as thinking we're becoming adults.
Pre-internet. I'm indoctrinating my kids. We're working them through Back to the Future. We're starting on Indiana Jones.
Oh my God. Are you recording, by the way?
Yeah.
Amazing. We'll just carry on. Okay, Back to the Future.
Done all three.
Yeah, third one shit.
I have a soft spot for all of them. But third one is definitely the least good.
Yeah, I think when I was a kid, the second one was the best, but it's the one that's aged the worst.
Yeah, I think that, the sexual mores in the whole Back to the Future thing is not something I noticed at the time. But going back in time and then getting hit on by your mum is
It's a bit weird.
Yeah, it's more noticeable as an adult as well.
I think the first one's brilliant. Raiders of the Lost Ark is my brother's favourite film of all time.
Also, I was so disappointed at the end of that one because you remember when the Ark opens and it all goes pear-shaped? That scared the shit out of me for the longest time. And then I watched it again with my kids and they just didn't care.
It's because things have changed. So do you remember when you first saw Alien and the alien comes out the stomach?
Yeah.
It was like terrifying.
Absolutely
In
horrific.
space. I remember when we went to Thailand, my daughter must have been about 8 years old. And she was like, can I watch the Alien film? I was like, no. She was like, please. I was like, no. Anyway, she put it on and I didn't realise. I looked over, I said, you watching the Alien film? She said, yeah. And it was literally that big. I said, you need to turn this off. And it bursts out of the stomach and goes across the room. But it looks so shit. And she's cracking up. She thinks it's fucking hilarious.
That's heartbreaking.
Yeah, I think it's things just aren't, cameras have moved on, special effects have moved on. The shitty monster isn't as scary anymore.
My children watch too much stuff. It's just...
Temple of Doom or Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I'd probably go Raiders.
Really? I'm more Temple of Doom.
I like the horror in Temple of Doom. I think the Kali Ma grabbing the guy's heart.
Yeah. What's his name? Short Stuff?
Yes.
He's the guy who just won the Oscar.
I know.
Unbelievable.
Well, I didn't know until I read about it.
Yeah, he's are we talking in foreign language?
Such boomers.
What was the film?
No, we're Gen X.
What was the film I couldn't believe you hadn't seen and I made
I think
you
it was
watch?
Back to the Future. I watched
Back to the Future. Did you
Yeah,
like
I
it?
watched it on a plane. It was actually pretty good. It was better than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, Back to the Future is a good film.
That's the greatest review it's ever had. Back to the Future, better than I thought it was going to be.
Back to the Future is an incredible film.
I think the second one as well, because you realise they reshot all the pieces of the first film with the second guy back in time, and then that just blows your mind. You think, I assume he was... It depends on whether you ascribe to the first Terminator's linear theory of time or the second one's loop theory. Maybe that's the wrong way around. One of the Terminators got one theory of time and the other one's got another.
Oh, hold on. Terminator 1.
The first one's the loop theory, because
Yeah.
he'd come back,
Yeah.
Kyle Reese had come back, and he'd already come back to become John Connor's father.
Yes.
And then no matter what Skynet did, it was always going to happen in that loop.
Yes, I remember now.
And then in T2, they suddenly realized, aren't we changing things now while we're talking? And then when they're talking to Miles, the man most directly responsible is Miles Bennett Dyson.
Yeah. I love T2.
The best film.
I remember because that came out of time. Have you ever seen the South Park movie?
Yes, a bigger, longer uncut.
Yes,
Yeah.
but do you know the very start where they're excited and go to the cinema? I had the same experience with Terminator 2 because I must have been 13.
1991, July 4th it came out.
13, yeah, you get bloody hell. That's weird. So I was 13. My favourite band in the world was Guns N' Roses. And so the trailer comes out and they're playing You Could Be Mine from Use Your Illusion 2. And there's like explosions, the truck goes off the bridge. And I was like, fuck, we got to go and see this. So me and all my mates, we went down there, we got there.
You
We're
got
like,
in?
No. They were like 4 tickets for Terminator 2. And they're like, how old are you? We're like, 15. Have you got any ID? No. And we couldn't go in. Actually, we might have even got asked for ID. They might have just said no. Because, that was the days when you didn't really carry ID as a 13-year-old.
No.
And so, no, I didn't get to go into the cinema and see it. I went to see something really shit instead, like The Little Mermaid.
Oh.
That was a different story. No, we used to have a cinema in Bedford. That was it. There was a cinema in Bedford that used to have 2 screens, and you'd go up. There's a beautiful cinema. You'd go up a set of stairs, and you take a right to the screen 2 and a left to screen 1. Screen 1 was unbelievable. It had 2 tiers in the cinema, big amphitheatre. Anyway, if you wanted to go and see the adult film, you pay for the kids' film and go in.
Clever.
So Flatliners was on. I was 12, couldn't get in. The Little Mermaid was on, so I paid for The Little Mermaid, but just walked into Flatliners. That was the good old days.
Cunning. Well, I haven't let my kids watch T2 yet, but that's going to be a special experience.
How old are they?
They're 10 and 8.
Yeah. Is 10-year-old a boy?
Oh, no, both girls.
Okay.
They can already do the lines. You know, if I say to them, I look up at the sky and say, "There's a storm coming," and they'll turn around and say, "I know."
Have they watched Die Hard?
Not yet, but that's on Christmas movie this coming year.
So the interesting difference with girls over boys is girls love horror films. So my son and his mates didn't care. They wanted to watch adventure films. My daughter, she's now 13, all they want to watch is horror films. And the worst horror, like literally the
That's
gross.
interesting.
Yeah, so there's something they had them all over for a sleep the other night. She was like, "Can we watch this, like Texas Chainsaw Massacre?" I was like, "No, absolutely not." And then they wanted to watch some other film, and I read the description. It was like demonic axe murderer comes back from hell to mutilate babysitters, some bullshit. I was like, what the that's all they want to watch.
It's funny. And my wife said the same thing. When she was young, she absolutely loved the Child's Play films.
Oh, yeah. Oh, where is he?
He's in the back.
Is he? I've got a great story. I've got a fucking brilliant... Do you want to grab him?
Yeah.
I've got a brilliant Child's Play story. So my daughter's into horror films. I was like, you need to watch Child's Play. I was like, that was my film as a kid, right? And she watched it and she loved it. And when I was out in... Where was I? I was in Austin. And they had one of those stores which had all film memorabilia, you know, posters and things from films and stuff. And I walked past the window. There's a fucking Chucky doll in the window. I'm like, I'm having that.
Fuck.
Yeah.
Well, mate, did you meet last year at Miami 2022, Kyra Gardner? Did you bump into her? She was at the whale party.
What?
Her dad did all the special effects of the Chucky films, and she's just made a short film. Oh my God, that is horrific.
Isn't it horrific? Anyway, so this is the Okay, so this is the maddest story, right? So I buy the doll and I bring it back for my daughter, and she's like, that's freaky. She loves it but hates it. And so we go through this process of like hiding it in each other's stuff. Like I put it in a school bag and she put it in my bed. And he said like 2 things. And then about 6 months after I bought him, he started saying new stuff.
Oh,
yeah.
You're joking?
No. So that's what he said that.
Okay.
Didn't say that. And he did that.
And you still keep it in your house?
He never said that. So he never said, "Hi, I'm Chucky, I want to play." So I was really pissed off about him not saying that. So I was like, that's the one thing you want him to say? Yeah, and about 6 months in, he started saying new things. And I was like, okay, either 1, this doll is actually possessed, which is freaky, or 2, they've put a time delay on the things he says, which really fucks with you.
That would be really funny if they did that.
That really fucks with you. Yeah. Sorry, anyway, so this is your wife's favourite. She loved these films.
She loved those. And yeah, so in Miami last year, I met this director whose dad had done all the special effects for Chucky. And then she actually just finally released it, which is great news because she's really talented. She's released a documentary about living with Chucky. You should watch it.
So that's out?
Yeah, I think it's out. Yeah,
I need to see that. Hold on.
I think, I can't remember the name of the film, but her name's Kyra Gardner.
So I recently watched a documentary about the making of Nightmare on Elm Street. And so they have not aged too well, but the original one is brilliant. The original one's really, really good still, because it's just straight in there. I don't like horror films now. It's always the same. It's like 2 blokes. Well, essentially, it's usually 3 guys, 2 girls. One of the guys is a virgin, so doesn't get to talk to anyone.
One of them's a jock. He's going to die.
Yeah, and him and his girlfriend always sneak off and have a snog. You know, they're going to shag. And then there's like the nerdy kind of couple who kind of like it's literally the same setup every time. Then they go somewhere and then they're drinking. And it's like, it's such a formula. But do you remember the original Nightmare on Elm Street?
It's fucking terrifying.
They literally start with murder straight away, like instant death. And there was, so they struggled to get financing for that film for a long time. They couldn't get it financed. They eventually did, and it's one of the most successful franchises ever. Have you seen it?
I have seen it, but so long ago I can't really remember it.
I mean, there was like 6, and then there was like the follow-up Freddie's Nightmares.
Yeah, the last one was not that long ago.
Yeah.
But it, it's a boomer kind of film.
Do you have a favourite film?
It's probably got to be T2 if I was put on the spot.
Oh, really?
I've never seen it.
You've never seen T2?
I've never seen Terminator 1 either.
Ooh, please watch them in the right order.
Yeah,
And do
okay.
it spoiler free. Watch the first Terminator and then the second one without knowing anything about it.
I'll download them and watch them on the plane
Yeah.
back.
Do you know what? I don't mind the third one. It's not brilliant, but it's not terrible.
I'm with you, actually. Also, the ending of the third one.
It's
again,
brilliant.
Don't want to spoil it for Danny.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
rescues the hot. Suddenly you think, oh my God,
Yeah,
what
that
have they
makes-
done there?
Yeah, so it makes it all make sense.
Mm.
When he's gone later, we'll do the interpretation. I imagine it'll be the same. I even didn't mind the resurrection one. That was okay, the Christian Bale one. I thought that wasn't too bad.
I mean, look, I've got to lay my cards on the table. I've never seen a Terminator film I haven't enjoyed, although if you're being a purist, I go for the first two. But
Yeah, first two. First one's brilliant. Second one is uniquely brilliant because the effects, the effects sound like shit. But when he got shot and like on a molten chest, it was like, how did they do that?
I mean, also the story of the second one is so powerful. I try to base all my parenting around that scene in the desert when Sarah's saying, watching John with the machine was suddenly so clear. The Terminator would never come home drunk and hit him. It would never happen.
How old were you when Matrix came out?
What year was that? 99?
1999.
8.
Do you remember it coming out and watching it?
No, I don't remember it coming out, but I've obviously watched it.
Did you watch it quite young and think it was like the
Yeah.
effects are unbelievable?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that was our Terminator.
I've not watched
Matrix
it back
was
in
our-
ages.
sorry,
though.
that was
Are
our
the
Matrix.
effects
It
bad
holds
now?
up. I watched it back. I watched it again last year, and it's still great.
Yeah.
Did you see the new Matrix?
Yeah, I did. It was
It's
shit.
horrifically bad.
I haven't seen it yet.
I thought the second and third Matrix were both pretty bad as well.
They were basically every time you wanted them in the Matrix, every time they were in that underground place,
The
it was just
ship, yeah.
fucking shit. Really pissed me off. Now, E.T. is my favourite film.
Love E.T. That was the first 80s film we showed my daughters. So
That was a weird film. So everyone seemed to see it on pirate before it ever actually came out.
did they?
Yeah,
That's funny.
yeah.
E.T.?
So in the olden days,
Did you buy it off your ice cream man
no,
or something?
in the olden days, what you used to have, my dad will remember this, you used to have a guy who would come around your house with a suitcase. You'd open the suitcase and you would rent a video from him and you'd come back the next night and get it. Or
Rent like a pirated video.
No, I don't know. Dad, were they pirate? Remember the old guy with the suitcase used to come around? Yeah, it's pirate. So, yeah. But literally, you'd walk in your house with a suitcase, a big suitcase, open it up, and it was like a mini Blockbuster. And you go, I want that one.
The original Pirate Bay.
Yeah, and I remember one time, we all wanted Stand By Me. You ever seen Stand By Me?
Is that the
Stephen King
Yeah, Stephen King.
adaptation, yeah.
Stephen
Yeah.
Hawking.
Have you seen it?
I think so.
You got to see it if you haven't.
I'm like you with names. I can't remember films.
So we got Stand By Me. We all wanted it. My dad got it, but my dad watched it first, and we all wanted to see it. And he said, "No, it's too much swearing. You can't watch it." Fuck's sake.
They riffed on the pirate stuff we were just talking about. Did you see that series called White Gold?
Yes,
That was good.
That was good.
Yeah.
But do you remember one of the characters was pirating E.T. up in the
you're
office?
right, yeah.
Yeah. So
There you go.
oh my God, that was true.
Yeah, no, it was true. So the weird thing, I remember it because I remember when it got released. And I was like, hold on, I saw this a year ago. Everyone had seen it pirated. So,
Hilarious.
do you know the story of was it the ET computer game that never got
Oh my
released?
God, it's in landfill in Nevada or somewhere, isn't
Yeah.
it?
So what happened? You should look it up. So they made an ET game for Atari. It was probably one of the most expensive games to make ever. Something stupid like that. When they eventually released it, it was so shit. It was when it was going for release, and they were so embarrassed, they basically wouldn't release it and then put it all in a landfill so no one could get it. And then someone went and dug it up, so you can buy and it's quite rare. You can buy
No
gold
way.
dust.
More scarce than Bitcoin.
Yeah, all these films. I think Danny
It
Hansen.
looks really shit.
It is really shit. Danny Hansen Gremlins.
No. But why would I have?
Because it's brilliant. I've seen films before my time that are
Yeah,
brilliant.
but is that actually a good film? I thought it was
Gremlins
like
is
a joke.
incredible.
Gremlins is. Sometimes it's nice to go back and see. It's like you give books 20 years to see if they. Yeah, exactly. Are they going to survive the test of time? There's a website called Ruthless Reviews. I'm trying to work my way through. It's absolutely freaking hilarious reviews of all these bad 80s action films. Then they have like a categorization. Entire film described in fewer words than are in this sentence. And then like Top Gun is hot, sweaty studs, take showers, fly planes. And
The new Top Gun was good.
Yeah, it was. It was actually. I had a film blog before the podcast. It was called Fuck Off Film.
oh yeah, I've heard you talk about that.
Yeah, it's called Fuck Off Film. And I used to do really offensive film reviews. And then I used to interview the last guy in the credits.
Oh yeah, I listened to one of your shows. You spent 3/4 of it talking about movies. I'm sorry, we've just done the same thing right
Yeah,
now.
That'd
I'm
have
so
been the one
sorry.
with Eric
it that?
Jakes. Yeah.
Oh, was it? Yeah, it was in there, wasn't
Yeah.
it?
It was he's the guy who wrote the seven
Yeah.
properties.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that show, but
There's a lot of films.
well, I like films as well as Bitcoin. So.
Well, so the funny thing is, when we do something like this, we've been going 10 minutes.
15.
I'm so sorry.
You know, you haven't got a time on there.
Yeah, we don't need that.
Oh, we had it yesterday.
Yeah.
When we do stuff like this, you get people who write in, they'll be like, oh my God, that's amazing. I loved it. Do more non-Bitcoin stuff. And then you get half the other people going, fucking hell, I only listen to you for Bitcoin. Cut all this other shit. Or they'll put a little timestamp in YouTube. Bitcoin starts here.
Bitcoin starts here. Okay.
So maybe we should do like 30 seconds of Bitcoin.
thank you for having me on?
Of course, man.
I'm not sure where you are with your drinking at the moment, but I wanted to.
I'm back drinking.
Oh, you excellent. Just a little thank you for having me on. That
Oh my God.
goes very nicely with barbecue
Wow.
and brisket.
Burnt ends, blended whiskey, small batch, smooth. Oh, wow.
That looks cool.
That is very, that's very kind.
you.
Thank you. Hold on, I'm going to have a smell of this.
If you've got some like slow cooked,
Wow. That tastes like a blend of bourbon and scotch.
it is. It's
Is it?
It is. It's quite unusual. I'd not had given to me by a Norwegian friend originally, and then I loved it and got a lot more.
Peated and sherry finished single malt scotch. Oh, interesting. Yeah,
Yes,
but I'm more of a bourbon. Like, I find scotch a bit too harsh, but I do like bourbon. But that's actually, you want to try it?
I don't like whiskey.
I know you don't. But you always end up having one when we have it.
Do you have a bourbon with like barbecue?
Oh, I like
I
that
do.
though.
Yeah.
That's because that.
It was very peat. That's like,
Yeah,
that's like an
It's like a
advert.
bit sweeter.
Yeah, exactly. I think it gets the sweetness from the Tennessee mash, and then.
Do you want to join?
Oh yeah, go on.
Yeah, go on.
We can get glasses if you
Let's
want.
just get fucking back. What's the time?
12.
We could get little glasses.
Yeah, I'm back in the not drinking phase. No, we can't start drinking. We can have a little one.
Should I get glasses?
Yeah, let's get glasses. So we met up in Scotland. I forgot we met up in
I've
Scotland.
got my Bedford hat over there. I bought it from your daughter, actually.
Oh, I just thought that was like some of our merch lying
No, that's
around.
mine.
Oh, fantastic.
I got lots of smiles on the train. Thank you.
Yes, you would have coming into Bedford. They were like, why's he got a Bedford hat on? We're about to win the league.
I know. I follow your updates. It's very exciting.
Yeah, we're going to win the league on Monday. So we could have. There's winning it and there's mathematically winning it. So 3 more points, we've won it. But there is a scenario where if we lose every game and the other team wins every game and they turn over a 40-goal difference, that they can win the league. So that's mathematically. So we can win it on Saturday, kind of, but mathematically on Monday, Easter Monday, at home against our local rivals.
That's going to be a big game.
That's
Oh
a
shit,
big game.
Danny!
You should come.
You gave me the date. I'm in Norway.
Oh, when do you go?
And when are we flying? We're flying on Monday or Tuesday.
When are you back?
16th, I think we fly back.
Oh, God, you're going to be away for our live event.
Oh. Thank you very much.
No, thank you. It's your whiskey. What the fuck are we doing drinking whiskey at 12?
It's,
I'm going to get some care emails saying, Pete, what are you doing? You did so well. Right, so we met up in Scotland up at the UK conference, which I think, by the way, they did a brilliant job on.
absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
Such a good atmosphere.
Yeah.
Like I said, I was in Miami last year, and obviously that's Miami. Loved it, but the combination of fantastic atmosphere, really great people speaking, really great attendees, I just all came together in Edinburgh. It was a lovely event.
It reminded me a little bit of the first Bitcoin, well, I can't say Miami because it was in San Francisco, but the first Bitcoin conference, Bitcoin 2019. That was 2,000 people, 1,900 people, very small, one auditorium that probably held 1,000 people. It was in like an industrial building where you kind of went up through a ramp to where the like exhibitors were, and then up another ramp, and then there was like a roof terrace with all the food and street food, and basically you're either watching a talk or hanging out by the food, and there was only 2 or 3 places to go, so everyone kept together. It was kind of like a hangout, a party, festival, and I've been blown away by how much they've grown this. And if I was them, I would grow exactly the same, because if you have 25,000 people come in, you're going to be making 20 times what they had, revenue rise, and that's amazing. But I did miss that smaller, intimate thing.
Yeah, it was just so nice to be able to wander around. And I mean, that was where I first met you.
Yeah.
Just saying hi, and I bumped into. I was saying Danny. I met Jeff there as well. I had a chat with him. Couldn't have been nicer.
Yeah, lovely guy. He's here next Friday in Bedford.
I've timed everything so badly.
You have timed it badly. You're missing out on all of it. Hold on. Anetta, there's a video. You're on the video camera.
Wave to the podcast.
Wave to the podcast. Anetta, so we're going to be an hour and a half in here. Is it? Did you want to what do you want to do? You and I. Okay. I don't know if you're going to edit that out, but that's.
I kind of hope not.
That's Anetta. It's my Polish wife who doesn't live here. She's amazing. So anyway, great conference. And we're going to expand ours next year to a full conference here in Bedford.
Fantastic.
Yeah, we're not going to announce it, but we've secured we've got nods from 3 excellent keynotes. I'll tell you afterwards.
That's a terrific idea.
It's going to be at the Bedford Corn Exchange, probably a 2-day event with, hopefully 600 to 700 people if we can do it, if we can pull it off.
Yeah.
So next Friday is a
Fantastic.
test.
Well, just give us the dates and I'll lock it in.
We don't know. So what I want to do is this one's really cool because we've got the event on the Friday and then it's the last Bedford home game of the season. So everyone can come to the event and come watch the football. It's got a real nice synergy to it. Yeah, for those people who, not everyone likes the football thing, but those who do like the football can do both.
But you can spend your Bitcoin at the club, right?
You can.
So
you can buy a jersey. We can have some limited edition one, Satoshi 21 ones. Hopefully that will say league champions. Keep your fingers crossed. But yes, we're going to do that. But they did a great job.
It's such a shame you didn't win the league in 2021.
Yeah, I mean that would have been particularly hard. Firstly, I didn't own the club.
And were there even any games in 21?
There was 2021 no, because of COVID. 21, 22 yes. Okay. But I guess you could claim it's 21. Winning the cup in 21 would have been good. But anyway. So how long have you been in the UK?
So came back from Zim in 1996. So been here for quite a long time now.
Okay.
And as you can tell from my strong Zimbabwean accent, the UK has rubbed off on me.
You've got that soldier accent.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, I think so.
There's a similarity between the Zimbabwean accent, the clipped vowels, and the old school posh British accent.
Yeah.
Although both kinds of accent lead to a lot of mockery. So.
It's that kind of like public school lieutenant or colonel, whatever is it you become. I don't know.
You've got to wear a striped tie at all times. Doesn't matter if you're not wearing any other clothes, as long as you've got on the striped tie, you're properly attired, that kind of stuff.
So Zimbabwe in 1996. So is that at the height of the violence and reclaiming of the farms?
It actually wasn't too bad back then.
No.
So the process of kind of moving farms out of white ownership back into black Zimbabwean ownership started, my memory's going to be faulty here, started sort of mid-90s. And then it accelerated towards the end of the decade and then got particularly bad like 98, 99, 2000s.
Was that under Mugabe though?
Under Mugabe, yeah.
But was inflation still hitting high then?
It was pretty bad even when I was a teenager. So
okay.
A lot of my pegging to inflation is associated with pocket money. So like my first I've still got the $2 bill that I got when my first tooth came out. I stuck it in a piggy bank, found it years later. Rather sadly, it now sits on my wall together with a $100 billion bill, which represents about the same value, but I keep them together on a display.
That's some pretty heavy inflation there.
Pretty horrific. It was running at between 20 to 50% inflation when I was a teenager,
which is moderately good for Zimbabwe. But if that hit us, that would be horrendous.
50% inflation is insane. You lose half your purchasing power in a single year.
How old were you?
16 when we left.
Okay, but how old were you? So when you start, as a child, I was aware of inflation. I've talked about this on the podcast, on the news. They'll say inflation is just above a target of 2%, and I always just thought it was like a sign of growth. Okay, great, that's their target. They want to see. I never really paid any of attention to it properly until we made this show, And I had no need as a kid to understand it.
No.
But as a kid, did you naturally understand it because of what was happening?
I think from a perspective of knowing your purchasing power is diminishing, and as a kid, you're aware that the money you're getting, the money you're earning, is diminishing in its ability to purchase things.
Yeah.
So silly example I often use is deposits for bottles. So Zimbabwe always had a Coke bottle deposit system, and a Coke used to be $2, but you'd get $1 back if you took the glass bottle back to the store.
That's a good return.
It was good. It was fantastic, and particularly for for scrappy kids like us. So loads of people would drink these things at our rugby games at the weekend, and if you stay behind after the match, you go around and collect 30, 40 different bottles.
Do you know what the modern version of that is?
No.
So at Bedford Rugby Club, they have the reusable cups.
Yeah, they do it at Twickenham as well.
Yeah, and you basically see these kids going around saying, "You done with your cup?" And everyone's like, "Oh, go on then." And so you see these kids walking around with like a tower of cups, like up under their arm, going over their shoulder. And you're looking like, that's fucking 30 quid there. And so they take them back and they get £1 for each one, and they go around and do it again. These kids are making 40, 50, 60 pounds at a rugby match.
Yeah, it's a great idea.
And you can't say no. No, I want my £1. Fuck off, 10-year-old.
No, the kids are clearing up and they're making some pocket money.
Yeah, good for them.
But it becomes noticeable when the price of the Coke wildly accelerates beyond the price of the deposit.
Right.
And that's the kind of thing you notice as a kid, or the fact that you're, instead of getting $2 for a tooth, that's not really buying anything anymore, and you maybe need to be getting $10, $15, $20 for a tooth. And it very quickly begins to accelerate out of control. And I mean, ironically, Zimbabwe is probably the best working example we have in recent history of how it accelerates. At one point, the government stopped putting out official inflation figures because they were meaningless. They were so big you can't even imagine the number.
And can I ask what trade your parents were in?
Sure. So, I mean, you see from my parents, I lived in various odd places. So I was raised by my stepdad and my mum.
Okay.
So my parents separated when I was about 4 or 5 years old. And my stepdad's job he was with the British Council.
Okay.
So for anyone who hasn't heard of the British Council, they're like the cultural wing of Britain's self-publicity abroad. So they organise things like scholarships, and they bring plays and performers over to different locations, and they set up links between universities in those jurisdictions and jurisdictions back home. And so we were sent off to the Middle East when I was 5. And then obviously various things happened there, which we make it into. And then Zim was my dad's last posting. And after his posting finished, he retired out there. So,
Would he have been paid in pounds or local currency?
interesting. So we actually saw both sides of it in Zim. So he was paid in pounds when he was still employed by the British Council, but he retired in '89, and then he took a bit of time out. And then he began teaching, and it was really noticeable at that point. So up until then, he'd been paid in sterling, and then when he began teaching, he was paid in local currency. And our family's personal financial circumstances took a massive nosedive at that point. It actually became quite tough.
Because of the inflation?
Well, you're paid in local currency, and as we're seeing in the UK at the moment, typically when inflation is going insane, salaries never keep pace with inflation. Mm-hmm. And that's the kind of thing that precipitates the strikes that we're seeing at the moment.
Yeah.
And you will have seen the pronouncements from Andrew Bailey recently talking about be very, very good if you didn't increase your prices, or if you didn't ask for a pay rise.
Yeah, just stop printing money, Andrew, you fucking prick.
Well, did you see the Telegraph story yesterday?
Oh my God, did you see that?
I did. I saw you tweeted it.
Yeah, I mean, I took that from Dominic Frisby, hat tip mate. That it's got nothing to do with them.
I thought the Telegraph's headline was quite funny. They were clearly taking the piss. It said, "Rampant inflation has nothing to do with our wanton money printing," or something like that.
So you were experiencing that. Your father and mother's wealth is eviscerating before their eyes.
Yeah, pretty much at an astonishingly fast pace. It is difficult to describe, unless you've experienced it, how the loss of 50% of your purchasing power year on year feels. And we in Zimbabwe, there's really no free education to speak of. There are some government schools, and there are some bigger privately owned schools, but broadly speaking, everyone pays to attend school.
Yeah.
Everyone's earning in some Zim dollars as they were then, paying in Zim dollars, and the schools are upping their prices. And obviously, the horrific thing with like a global inflation is that none of the price increases ever keep up with each other. There are always some that are increasing faster than others, and the ones that increase faster than others tend to be the absolute necessities, food, water, housing, electricity. And then there's this horrendous lag where your income is not keeping pace with your outgoings. And then what choice do you have other than to strike?
Yeah. I mean, this is the highest inflation I've lived through as an adult. I don't know if it was high when I was a kid, but it's the highest I've lived through. And I'm noticing things. So whatever they claim the inflation is, I think they say about 10%.
About 10.
I think depending on what it is, it's between 10 and 20%. So we've seen a massive increase in our energy prices. I've just bought a bar, which I close on today.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And everybody is raising their prices. Various other things with property, insurance. My insurance has gone up. I'm seeing it all. But at the same time, we're not raising our prices on the podcast. So, we're not raising our drinks in the bar because we know everyone's being hit. But at the same time, you have to rethink your staff. They have to be paid. So everything you don't want to go goes up, and everything you want to go up goes up can't. And so that's my experience at 10 to 20%. And it's annoying. It's survivable. You rethink and reshuffle. If you took that to 50%, I actually don't know. I can't envisage the consequences, especially if that was year after year. I cannot imagine what that's like.
Tends to accelerate as well.
Yeah.
And there are also all kinds of other second-order consequences which may be unseen at the beginning of the process. And one of the most obvious is that people stop saving. So if you know that your money is going to be worth half this time next year as what it's worth today, why the hell would you put it in your bank? Spend it.
But even at 10% inflation, I'm looking at the money in my bank and thinking, well, I should do something with it.
I think it's 6 years. So at 10% inflation, doesn't the maths work? It's 5 or 6 years you've lost half your purchasing power.
Well, because it's compounded though.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think it would. I would have estimated 6 years you've lost it all. I don't know. I'd have to do the maths.
It's a weird bit of maths.
Yeah, no, it's an inverse, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. No, you're probably right. Yeah. I mean, I'm even looking at anything I have, which is cash now. I'm thinking I should spend it or put it somewhere. But then does that compound inflation because you're spending more?
Well, again, it gets to the root problem of all of this. Why the hell should you have to spend your time thinking about this instead of doing something productive with your time?
Yeah.
It means everyone has to be a financial engineer. And that's a gigantic waste of your time, talents, and brain power. And people shouldn't have to do that kind of stuff.
And so, was this happening prior to Mugabe, or can you blame all of this on Mugabe?
It was a lot of it was to do with what happened to the economy. So Zimbabwe, I mean, I have to say, cards on the table, I loved living in Zimbabwe. It was a wonderful place to grow up. It had the most fantastic climate in the world. Harare is one of the only cities, definitely one of the only capital cities, I think, where you don't need heating or air conditioning.
Huh.
Lovely climate. And the education system in Zim was terrific. It was genuinely, hand on heart, it was a wonderful place to grow up.
And how integrated was it between the blacks and the whites?
For my generation, pretty good. So we were too young to remember much segregation. And actually, our school had let the first black pupils attend in the 60s.
Okay.
So there'd been 2 or 3 different generations. Like I was at school with a boy called Douglas Chingoka, and his uncle, I think it was Peter Chingoka, had been one of the first black kids at St. George's.
But would it have been all levels of prosperity mixing, or was it the more fortunate, wealthy blacks mixing with the historic white population?
Yeah, that's a good question. So independence in Zim happened in 1980.
Yeah.
Just missed it, actually. April the 4th, I think it was.
Okay.
Oh, no, April the 8th.
Were you born there?
No, I was born in London.
Okay.
And then moved to Syria when I was 5, and then on to Zim when I was 8.
Okay.
So our class was pretty. I was minority white, so the majority of my school was black. We had a reasonably big Asian community as well, but we'd all grown up in a free Zimbabwe that was independent, And to this day, we've still got WhatsApp groups going with my class from Zim, and there's very good, I think, rate certainly mixing in terms of races, but the economic point you raise is completely valid. There's a huge stratification in terms of,
It's fine.
in terms of where you sit in the wealth stratum. And there was no real middle class to speak of previously in Zimbabwe. So a lot of Western society, you've got like a 3 stratum of societies. You've got largely divided in terms of wealth. In Zim and a lot of other countries of that nature, you tend to have sort of 2 divides. You have an elite, and then you have a larger group of people at the bottom.
Right.
And it's very hard to move between those. In fact, it's harder to move, obviously, between the lower levels and the elite than it is to move between the classes in the UK. Difficult that can be as well.
Right. Do you know about this, the redistribution of the farms?
I mean, I've heard about it. I don't know in detail though.
Yeah, I mean, you should probably explain it better than I would. But my question with regards to that is, I'm fully aware that the program to redistribute the farms was chaotic, badly thought through, dangerous, led to death, murder of farmers, fear and people fleeing the country, and then a destruction of the productivity of the farms because they were handed over to people who didn't know how to operate a farm. Like, I'm aware of a lot of that. Please add context where I've got it wrong. But was there any validity to the idea that there should be something done to redistribute opportunity?
I think almost everyone you speak to would say, yes, that should have happened, because these were, by and large, farms which had been taken from, in some cases, ancestral lands. And people have been forcibly moved off their territory.
Okay.
Not necessarily by the farmers who were operating the farms at the time, but maybe by their ancestors or by people 100 years ago. So the question of distribution of land is very, very difficult to talk about, because I think most people would agree with the aims and goals, which was to try and give people back their land which had been forcibly taken from them.
By forcibly taking it from current owners.
It could have been done in a more thoughtful and better way. For example, your point about giving the farms to people. So a lot of the farms in Zimbabwe were absolutely gigantic. Some of them was the size of small counties in the UK.
Wow. Okay.
And to manage a farm of that size, you needed an army of people, an enormous amount of infrastructure to manage a farm that big. If at independence people had started to be trained how to manage those farms, and if there had been some form of compulsory purchase of those farms at market value, and then when those farms were purchased, black farmers had been put in who knew what they were doing, and a lot of the farms were split up, and you lose some of the economy of scale if you split up a gigantic tobacco farm and try and run it as 80,000 small tobacco farms. It doesn't really work. So I think the spirit of land redistribution was right, insofar as this land was unlawfully taken in many cases from people whose ancestral land it was. But the way in which it happened was unfortunately chaotic, and ultimately led to a lot of the destruction of the agricultural prosperity of Zimbabwe, which itself precipitated a lot of the inflation.
Yeah. And was it... where did the idea come from? Was it directly from Mugabe, and was it kind of populist idea, or was there an ongoing generational debate regarding this?
It's old. It's an old idea. So there were a couple of different liberation struggles in Zimbabwe. They were called the Chimurengas, which roughly translates as Liberation War. The one that most people will be familiar with is the war that was fought against Ian Smith's Rhodesian army. There was a guerrilla war in the late 70s and very early 80s. And to be honest, a lot of it did boil down to land. Black Zimbabweans were moved off land. They were concentrated into... It was never as bad as apartheid in South Africa, which was much more horrific. But Black Zimbabweans were treated as second-class citizens, and that's awful. It shouldn't have happened.
Yeah. How is Zimbabwe now? What do you know?
I'm still in touch with a lot of people there and my friends up here. The inflation is going nuts again.
Okay.
Not as bad as it was. I think the rate is 150%. At least it was last time I checked.
I mean, that's still horrific.
It's still insane.
Yeah.
And they went through various periods of striking zeros off the notes.
Yeah.
The US dollar was used, as in many developing nations, as currency, and then the US dollar was arbitrarily banned. The government banned people from putting prices up.
Yeah.
The tried and tested means of controlling inflation.
Which never works.
Absolutely never works.
Yeah. Which
It's down to 92%.
Oh, that's good.
manageable. Yeah. I mean, well, look, we've seen loose calls for price controls in the US. I think I saw Elizabeth Warren talking about price gouging with it. I mean, it's always the same. It's the problem is caused by the fuckos within government, and then their ideas are the ones which exacerbate the problems. Which is it's a typical story that's repeatedly told, country to country to country. But it's really interesting to meet someone who's lived through it. When I went out to Venezuela a few years ago, what was super interesting to me is everything is priced in the bolivar, and you have to use the bolivar. But everyone wanted the dollar, and there were 5 currencies. There was people using the bolivar because they had to, people wanting the dollar because they knew it was stable. Some people were using the Colombian peso because they wanted that because it's a border nation.
Okay.
You had the petro, that ridiculous. I mean, it was a ridiculous cryptocurrency that didn't work, and people
Does it
just
still exist?
I don't know, but I met one lady had it, and she just reclaimed the money from it. And then you had Bitcoin, of course, and then obviously a plethora of other shitcoins. But people were choosing what they wanted to use, but they had to use the bolivar. But what they naturally knew is, I wanted the dollar. I wanted the dollar. There's never been a time in the UK where people have been like, oh, I need an alternative to the pound because the inflation's high. Yeah, some people say they need Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is like a weird thing where you've got to get all the timing right and you've got to be patient. It's not like an instant. It's not like, oh, I know inflation's going to hit me every single week, so I want the dollar. You can buy Bitcoin to avoid pound inflation and be down the following week. So it's a weird alternative. But I've also seen it in Cambodia. When I went out to Cambodia, it was similar. In the cities, people wanted the dollar. So I've experienced that scenario, and I've seen it. When you were there, were people trying to get alternative currencies? Or was it harder?
It hadn't got to the point where it was a kind of an existential need. So when we were in Zim, we were faced with problems like capital controls, getting money out of your country. It's a fairly obvious point, but there's not a huge demand for Zimbabwe dollars outside of Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
There wasn't even in the 1990s. So one of the great things the US obviously has is that there's gigantic demand for US dollars all over the world, as you've just described. And that enables them to export some of their inflation because they've artificially increased the demand for US dollars in multiple different jurisdictions like Zimbabwe who need dollars. So if you want to leave Zimbabwe, it's very hard now. And even when we left, it was extremely difficult to do so.
You mean difficult to leave in terms of what you take with you?
What you take with you.
Yeah.
So actually, the way we did leave, I think I mentioned to Neil.
Danny told me this morning. Yes.
I've got a picture of the car in there.
Oh, you got to show me that.
Well,
Tell the story.
I'll tell the story.
Yeah.
So like I said, my dad had been in the British Council, retired out there. We bought a little chicken farm, which we ran for a few years. We had 5 or 6 acres, orchard, bunch of chickens. My dad was teaching, and then he eventually retired from teaching as well. He wrote a book. Randomly, that was how I met Mugabe, actually, when I was 15.
You met Mugabe?
Yeah.
I always thought it was unusual that he decided to be only the second person to have a moustache like in that design. I mean, I always thought it was unusual as a tyrant to decide, actually, of all the moustaches I'm going to choose, I'm going to match Hitler.
The thing is, he was a popular president, and I mean, remember, again, a lot of Zimbabweans will feel conflicted about Mugabe. The guy was a war hero, and he won his country back from the British.
Yeah,
and I think that underlies a lot of the policies that came later.
Yeah,
he fought against the oppressor and he won, and that carried him an enormous length of time. That enabled him to stay in power, even though the economy was collapsing and there was some opposition, and he eventually began to repress that opposition quite violently. But
power corrupts, my friend.
Yeah, to this day, I don't really know what to think about Mugabe, because I grew up in a country that was wealthy and prosperous, in no small part through what he and ZANU had done. But then Zimbabwe is suffering now. It's very sad, to be honest.
It's that really tricky thing. This is where I look at not Venezuela, El Salvador with guard, because I've obviously met Bukele
Bukele, yeah.
on a few occasions. I've interviewed him twice.
How many dictators have we met between us?
How many?
Dictators have we met between us?
We've met a few. I haven't met Rishi Sunak, but anyway.
It's not a dictator yet.
Yeah, his conservative government are displaying.
I've met Sunak.
Have you?
Yeah.
I think he's fucking terrible.
He's very small.
Is he? But I'm quite small. I think everyone's small compared to you.
I don't know.
Anyone
so did
listening?
Danny.
Freddie's shoulders are about the breadth of this table.
Who could deadlift more, me or George from CoinDesk?
Ooh, I would. My
What does
money
he
would be
pull?
on you. George is about Danny's build, but a bit shorter.
But he
Curious.
shifts some tin though.
Yeah, but look at the size. This guy's arms are like my legs. So I've obviously met him, and in preparation for the interviews, I've done my research on Venezuela, the history of corruption within the government, presidents fleeing and hiding out in Nicaragua, or arrested or accidentally dying, who all pilfered the country and essentially never given El Salvador a chance. And the thing about Bukele is he's certainly showing the traits of a dictator, but potentially a benevolent dictator, which if only time will tell, and he will be judged in time. But at the moment, he is changing the fortunes of that country. He's made it significantly safer. He's brought tourism into the country. He's boosted the economy. I mean, he has changed the fortunes of El Salvador. There are questions with regards to human rights, with regards to the rounding up of gang members and imprisoning people without fair trial, etc., which Alex Gladstein has highlighted. But he's changed the fortunes of that country. The constitution says only one term. They found ways around that to have a second term.
People do.
And which, by the way, I think he needs a second term. I mean, one that isn't enough to do the job he's doing, and he could be replaced by somebody who would screw up everything he's done. I think the test of time will be when times turn bad and people turn on him. How does he react? Does he accept it and step down? Does he arrest journalists? Does he imprison opposition? Does he go down that route that many previous dictators, tyrants have gone down, or does he accept it? I mean, I like the guy. I hold him with high regard, and I wish the best for him in that country. But I'm also very guarded because history has told us how this plays out again and again.
Yeah, that's completely true.
Yeah.
I mean, personally, I don't feel as I can judge Robert Mugabe. You know, my memories and feelings towards Zimbabwe are coloured by the very happy upbringing and childhood I had there. And I know that his popularity was in no small part to begin with because of what he'd done. I mean, the guy was a political prisoner for quite a long time. And I don't feel as I have to withhold judgment. You know, I loved growing up there. I know that terrible things have happened since. It's a very difficult situation.
But Nelson Mandela was also imprisoned, political prisoner,
Yeah, exactly.
fought for South Africa and died a global hero, somebody who stood up for fairness, democracy, human rights, and was somebody everyone. I've never heard a post-release criticism of him. Of course, I've heard criticism of him as a freedom fighter, or he's accused of being a terrorist.
He was, yeah.
But from his release, I've never heard anyone say anything bad about him. Mugabe's kind of gone the opposite direction in that, yes, and I don't know the history, you know better than me, but I think he destroyed that economy and he has to take responsibility for that. Or he had to. I mean, he's dead now, so.
Yeah. And to be honest, the facts speak for themselves. Whether you attribute blame to a particular person or to a particular policy, the economy did collapse. The currency did hyperinflate, and as Danny said, 90% inflation is not brilliant. So, the country's gone through waves and waves of economic collapse, not just single, but over a couple of decades now.
Was his party ZANU-PF?
ZANU-PF,
yeah. Are they still the ruling party?
They're still, yeah. There are a few. I mean, Morgan Tsvangirai was he was head of the MDC, the Movement for Democratic Change, and he made some strides towards towards having a second party, but Zimbabwe's a complicated place.
Right. Have you been back?
The clothes. I went back for a wedding to the northern border with Zambia.
Okay.
So sadly, I've never been back to Harare, but I have friends there who are talking about. Random example: the municipal water supply is now so poor that people are sinking boreholes in their gardens, which is it wasn't like that when I was there.
So you may have a reason to go back.
I mean, I'd love to go back, particularly with my kids, so they can see where I grew up and why I have a weird accent.
I'd like to go.
It's a wonderful country. I mean, seriously, go to Hwangi, to the national park, go to Victoria Falls, the Eastern Highlands.
I've not actually been to Africa. Yeah, we were planning to go out there and make films in April. Was it April 20 or April 19?
No, April 2020.
April 20, and obviously all the borders closed. And yeah,
well, the potential for gridless, for example, to start hydro mining in. I mean, one of my we have a sort of Zimbabwean Bitcoiner group, and I keep on banging on about the Kariba Dam.
Yeah, well, I mean, I know the name.
One of the biggest dams in the world. So the Lake Kariba is the size of Wales, and the hydropower from that dam powers a gigantic amount of Zimbabwe's electricity. It's just made for sticking a Bitcoin mine in there, and that instant foreign currency for the country. And the Eastern Highlands are full of little rivers. All of those could be dammed. They could have a small gridless mining unit stuck on them.
Well, we're planning to go out there. So our next films should be out in the next few days, covering mining out in the US, and we want to follow that by looking at what gridless is doing in Kenya. So if I go, I'll let you know. If you want to come out and you want to meet me in Zimbabwe, I'd love to go.
That'd be epic.
We should
bring your kids.
Yeah, we should do that. I don't know if I'll bring mine, but
we need to get into the car.
oh yeah, the car.
I'm so sorry.
That was a long story.
Yeah. So there was a long intro.
Danny's like, show me the fucking car.
I'm so sorry. I am rambling a lot.
No, it's good.
Okay.
So start at the beginning. We plan to come back to the UK for us to finish school and go to university and so on. I'm the eldest of 4 kids. And we sold our house, and then you're left with this problem. I've got all these Zim dollars, which is depreciating like 40-50% a year. And how the fuck do I get them out of the country? I'm allowed to swear.
Yeah, so yeah. Fuck you like.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, I get written to all the time. Like, can you stop swearing? I'm listening to this in the car with my children. I'm like, yeah, fuck, sorry.
Sorry, but if I swear in a posh voice, it doesn't really.
It's barely a swear word.
Exactly.
What was it? Stephen Fry, I think he said, why are all words relating to making love considered swear words, but words relating to murder and death aren't?
That's a good point.
Yeah. He's fucking right.
That's one for another podcast.
Yeah, look, I have a foul mouth.
So do I.
My father's learned how bad it is recently.
My children put a swear jar at home, and I'm repeatedly penalised.
Is the jar full?
It's brimming over.
Yeah, my children swear themselves. I tell them not to, but they occasionally a little one slips out here or there.
Oh, mine just think it's so funny. Sorry, anyway, Danny, the car.
Yeah, the car.
So,
get to the fucking car, man.
Yeah, so one thing that a lot of people in Zim do is they buy a car and then you drive it over the border, and literally all of your wealth is sitting in that car.
So there's no facility to send Zimbabwe dollars to the UK at that time?
You could exchange. The exchange rate was terrible, and it was getting worse every day.
So was there a black market exchange rate and like a real exchange rate?
Yeah, as in most developing nations. And it's also very hard to get your bank in the UK to give you pounds for Zim dollars, because the bank in the UK, like we say, there's no market for Zimbabwe dollars. So A, there may be no market, and B, the exchange rate is deteriorating day by day. So we bought a Rolls-Royce Silver Shadow, and then we drove over the border. We packed all of our stuff into a shipping container and then said goodbye and legged it.
How far did you take the car?
2,500 miles, roughly.
So
we drove from Harare down through Zimbabwe, through Masvingo, Great Zimbabwe, which is near where Anita Posh was.
Oh, she's amazing.
Well, I pinged her some sats. She was standing at Great Zimbabwe, which is, if anyone hasn't Googled it, is a it dates back to the Middle Ages. And it's a gigantic set of stone fortifications and buildings down in the south of the country. She was on Twitter, said, I'm in Zimbabwe. And I said, oh, fucking hell, stick an invoice in. So she did, and I pinged her some sats.
She's an absolute Bitcoin hero.
She's brilliant, isn't she? I love her.
Yeah.
So anyway, we drove down through the whole of Zim, crossed the Limpopo River at the south, Rudyard Kipling's Great Grey Green Greasy Limpopo, if you know your Justice
No, I
Furlow
don't.
stories.
Didn't you make cakes?
That may have been a remote cousin. So this is old, even older than Boomer stuff. I'm sorry. And then we drove down through the whole of South Africa over a space of about 2 weeks. Absolutely incredible journey through the Drakensberg Mountains, through the Garden Route, the Boer War battlefield, Zulu battlefields, Isandlwana, Rorke's Drift. You may have seen the Michael Caine film Zulu.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So we've been there.
Please tell me you've seen that. You have not seen Zulu.
No.
We're watching that tonight.
Okay.
Do you
I've never
know?
even heard of it.
You've not heard of Zulu?
No.
I've got some.
I promise you, it's incredible.
All right, we'll watch it tonight.
It is good fun.
I think it's Michael Caine's best film.
Wow.
I have some Zulu spears that were supposedly picked up from one of the battlefields. My great grandmother had been born in South Africa, and had collected various weapons and bits and pieces.
Wow.
And then we ended up in Cape Town with the car, drive the car into a container, and then we sailed from Cape Town all the way around Africa, and then we arrived in Tilbury. The most random. I mean, it was such a weird ending to the journey. It was cold and grey and rainy, and utterly fucking bizarre because they unloaded our car, opened the container. My dad walked into the container and then reverses out, and then we drive off. And no one stamped our passports. There's no record of us coming into the country.
So were they right-hand drives?
This was exported, so I've got a random. Sorry for the people listening. That's the car in Barberton. That's the town where my.
That's absolute classic Rolls Royce.
That's very cool.
We'll have to show it to the camera. That's an absolute classic. It's funny. I'm going to imagine. Tell me if I'm wrong. That car journey is one of your best childhood memories.
Oh, without a doubt, it was just astonishing. I mean,
we did a similar one. We went on holiday to Yugoslavia pre-Balkans War. must have been, God, what have I been, 5? Do you remember the year?
4 or 5. Yeah, I can't remember.
So we had a Yugoslavian family moving next door to us. I've told this on the podcast, and my mum made a real effort to make them feel welcome, like help them learn English and settle in. And after a year or so, they moved back to Yugoslavia and they invited us out. And I still don't know why we didn't fly. Did they not fly there? I remember. My dad had to take over. In Yugoslavia, you can't get good things like cameras and TVs and stuff. It's all absolute shit. And so the guy who, the father wanted some of this stuff. So we drove, and it was a 2-day drive through, I can't even remember where, we probably went through France, Belgium, Czechoslovakia, Germany. We went through all these, we drove all the way to Yugoslavia. It took 48 hours. It was a 2-day drive. And it's one of my happiest, I don't remember much from being 5, but I remember this, so many little bits. I remember the sausages that were disgusting that we ate in Germany.
What year were you doing this?
Well, so I would have been about 5, so about 83, 84.
Okay, because we did a similar drive when we went to Syria, but that would have been 80. I would have missed you by a year, but we would have been on the similar
journey.
route. Yeah.
And we drove all the way there. I remember. I can't remember hardly anything from being 5, but I remember that. I remember the bunk beds we stayed in. I remember in the car, because back then there were no phones or anything. No. We're all in the back of a. Was it the Mazda, the white Mazda? Yeah, back of a white Mazda.
There's no headrest.
Was it the Renault?
It was a Renault.
The Renault 18?
You slept on the parcel shelf.
Yeah, so I'd sleep on the parcel shelf. My brother would sleep on the back seat, and my sister would sleep like in the footwell.
Brilliant.
And my equivalent of a iPad was an Etch-a-Sketch. So I'd be playing with an Etch-a-Sketch. And I remember getting to Belgrade, and we went out and we got watermelon. I remember us going to the coast, and we needed matches, and me and their son went out and went into every tent stealing. We had like an arm full of matches. I remember so much of that, and I can't remember much else of my childhood, but that's such distinct memories.
Yeah, very much so. And my brother was the same age when we did this drive, and I think this is one of his earliest memories. He was 5 when we left.
So you got into the UK and sold the Rolls Royce and rebuilt the life.
Yeah, although I did notice it took my dad quite a long time to sell the car.
Did he not want to sell it?
I suspect not. He absolutely fucking loved it. I mean, it was a gorgeous machine.
Yeah.
Eventually, under pressure, he bowed down, and the car was sadly sold. But that represented our life in Zimbabwe in that vehicle.
And what was it like trying to resettle in the UK?
Pretty hard. I mean, I still feel like I've been here for a long time now, and I still feel like a bit of an alien.
Yeah.
I spent the majority of my childhood overseas with people who had very different values, very different obsessions. Not being mean about the UK, but it is a very easy place in some ways to live compared to some of the places where I grew up. And again, I don't want to judge anyone for having the benefit of that ease. Actually, slight segue. I don't know if you've read the SAS Survival Guide to Surviving in Different Jurisdictions, because
No, I mean, we're pretty safe around here in Bedford.
well, yeah, that's kind of the point of the story. So it goes through various different environments in which to survive, and then the bit on basically the UK and Western Europe is incredibly dismissive. It says, survival is easy, full stop, and then it goes on to more interesting places.
God, we skipped over Syria as well.
Yeah.
We'll come back to settlers.
Come
What was Syria like? Because was it obviously very different from it is now?
Very different. I mean, possibly the easiest way to describe Syria is it's so old. It's been inhabited for such a long time, and there is so much ancient stuff there. It is mind-boggling on the one hand. On the other, I feel desperately sad because I'm aware that a lot of that may have been destroyed in the wars. I find it difficult to talk about Syria because I was there when I was very young, and it's probably the place I've lived where the worst things have happened. And I like my friends at school, for example. I don't even know if a lot of them are still alive.
Yeah.
I was so young, I don't know a lot of their surnames. I can remember their first name. I can remember YL, Sinan, Catherine Haddock. Well, I got her surname. Roger.
How old were you?
I was nearly 7 when we left.
Okay, so quite young.
Quite young. But I didn't really get to say goodbye to any of these people because we left. I don't know is it worth going into a bit of how we left or why it happened so abruptly?
Is it pertinent?
I think it's pertinent. So I raised Syria and Zimbabwe because I think they have an interesting segue into Bitcoin for two reasons. So Zimbabwe, I think, is a useful illustration of how difficult capital controls can be and how extraordinarily difficult it is for a lot of people who live in the world to move money from one country to another. And part of the reason for the long and elaborate story about the Rolls Royce is that those capital controls and lack of demand for the Zimbabwe dollar result in you having to take quite outlandish steps to move money from one country to another.
That is your Bitcoin in 1990?
96.
96. That's your 1996 Bitcoin.
Yeah. So today I could cross a border naked with that in my head.
Yeah.
But back then that wasn't possible.
Yeah.
Syria's I raised Syria not necessarily to talk about the country or my experiences there, but the experience of leaving it.
Yeah.
So very briefly to recap, in sort of mid to late 86, there was something called the Hindawi affair happened. It was an international incident when a guy called Hindawi attempted to bomb an aircraft by putting some explosives into his pregnant girlfriend's luggage. Thankfully, he was caught. The bomb was defused. No one died, thank God. But the result of that meant that Syria broke off diplomatic relations with the UK and the UK likewise. So the embassy knew that they were going to have to get out. They were all being evacuated. We didn't know that we were included within the expulsion order because we, like I said at the beginning, we weren't quite connected to the embassy. But I can still remember an official from the embassy coming to our house. We lived on the ground floor of the block of flats called the Kuatli Buildings in Damascus. And this guy comes and knocks on the door, and my mum and my dad are both immensely agitated, and they come in and they just start grabbing packing cases. You know, we've got we'd moved there 2 years before. Packing cases come out of the cupboards and they just start going for it. And we were given 48 hours notice to get out of the country.
Holy shit.
To leave everything. And you know, this was my home at the time. I could barely remember London. yeah, and so my parents they stayed up for 48 hours. They packed the whole house. There were soldiers in the garden, Syrian army soldiers, and then we were escorted to the border by the Syrian army and
Turkish border?
Tartus.
Okay.
It's a port on the coast,
Okay.
and stuck on a ferry and told to fuck off.
Jesus.
And that was it. 48 hours, start to finish, boom, done.
Wow.
So I raised that as I think a lot of the ideas behind our chat are sort of angling towards why I feel perhaps Bitcoin and its properties appeal more to me than to some other people that my contemporaries working in the City of London or in finance or in law. I was lucky to have strange experiences as a kid, which I feel made the advantages of a money which you can carry in your head or which you can bring with you when you cross a border, or if the worst happened and you just had to drop everything and go, what could you take with you?
Yeah.
I think that's what it boils down to for me.
So we've traveled a lot making this show, and the hardest place to explain Bitcoin to is here in Bedford with my friends. Like it's so difficult. I try and explain to them. I've told them for years about inflation that's coming. I've told them about risks of banks. I've told them everything, but you almost have to go through more horrific experiences, more a genuine crisis to understand it. And no, I just can't get them to consider it. When I was in Argentina, or I was in Uruguay, but talking to Argentinians, and you explained to them, they're like, yeah, I get that. Yeah, I get that.
100%.
Yeah. Well, we used to we bought a house for cash. We used to we never kept money in the bank. Or most places in South America, it's very easy. People like Anita will tell you in Africa, it's very easy. When I was at the border with Venezuela and Colombia and Cucuta, very easy. It's very easy to explain to these people who've gone through crisis, suffered forfeiture, suffered hyperinflation. Like they naturally get it. It's almost like I'm waiting for a crisis. I can sit there and explain to people everything I've learned about the banks, central banks, high inflation, CBDCs. It's like I'm fishing without bait. I feel like I've got the best bait in the world, and like nobody's taken the line.
It's the difference between show and tell.
Yeah.
If someone has experienced something and you can show them a story, that's so much more powerful than lecturing them about it. And to be honest, I've spent a lot of time, I think, poorly lecturing people about why they should read about Bitcoin. I don't even tell people to buy it. So just go and read about it.
Yeah. I mean, on the Rail Bedford website now, we said, I've written an article called Why You Should Not Buy Bitcoin. And the whole article is about why you should learn about it.
Oh,
even if you don't want to buy
read
it, just learn about it, because it's going to arm you and better prepare you for the world we live in.
Apart from anything else, it's absolutely fucking mind-blowing.
Yeah.
The more, fucking hell, I think a few years ago I thought I knew so much about it, and then the more, it's like a Socratic dialectic. The more I read about it, the more I realize how ignorant I am.
Yeah.
And the more Bitcoin humbles you, doesn't it?
Yeah, and I think the more I learn, the more I realize how insidious central bank control over money is, how insidious our governments are. I think you get to like peer through the veil a little bit more, or behind the veil a little bit more, and I think it's like in the Matrix when you can disseminate
everything's going to green numbers.
Yeah, you can, and the green numbers you start to see them. You can just see stuff. So where historically I would have, I mentioned the other day I went to the shop to get a coffee in the morning, one of those Costa crappy machine ones. And there's a guy buying 3 newspapers. He's buying a Times. He got a Times, a Mirror. Or was it a Start? He got a broadsheet. Yeah, he got a highbrow broadsheet. He bought himself the lowbrow Daily Mail and then a tabloid. And I just thought, you're going to read these and accept it. I assume you're going to move on. I'm making an assumption here, but I just watch the news. I'll see Rishi Sunak or whoever, and I know the bullshit that's being said to us now. I just see it. And that's because of Bitcoin. I think I can see it.
Oh, completely. Something as simple as, I think in some ways it's better to start with thinking about money rather than thinking about Bitcoin. If you, And starting with something as simple as house prices. So there's an argument to be made to say that you can draw a direct line from the unaffordability of housing straight to the bank's ability to create new money without any cost to themselves. And if you break it down into small logical pieces, I think it can flow quite logically.
Yeah.
So obviously you can start with housing is expensive. True. How do most people buy houses? They get a
mortgage.
Mortgage, exactly. If no one could get a mortgage, what do you think would happen to house prices?
They would fall.
Well, they would fall, exactly. And that's a good thing. So when you go to a bank and you ask for a mortgage, where does it get that money?
Well, it would be lending based on depositors, but
we know that's not true.
Well, it's partially true. It's leveraged depositor income.
Did you read the Bank of England's paper on stablecoins a couple of years ago?
No.
There's a really interesting paragraph in that at the beginning.
Does it say we're fucking liars and we're going to fuck you?
No, they're quite honest.
But that would have been honest.
They talk about the nature of money. It's if you can't put it up, I'll find it for you. It was their consultation paper on stablecoins. I think it was in paragraph 1, and they talk about the two kinds of money that exist in Britain at the moment, and this is true for most developed economies. The first kind of money is it's a liability of the central bank. Mm-hmm. So they're not lying. They're not trying to hide this. They're quite open. The pound in your hand is a liability of the central bank, and I think the one thing I'd like to try and move away from is the concept of fiat money towards liability money.
Yeah, I like that.
Versus commodity money, which is Bitcoin.
Yeah.
Every single pound note, £10 note that you hold is a liability of the central bank. It fucking says it on it. I promise to pay the bearer on demand the sum of £10. Even worse than that, the next paragraph, they go on and they say, the second kind of money is created by commercial banks when they make loans. And you hang on. I thought commercial banks lent out deposits that other people... No, it's liabilities all the way down. Every single piece of sterling that exists is someone else's liability. And once you get your head around that, you suddenly realize the attraction of a money that doesn't have any counterparty risk.
Yeah.
That you can access 24/7, that no one can confiscate from you if you use it properly and if you custody it properly. So, coming back to the mortgage point, these fucking banks are creating money out of thin air at the moment you sign your mortgage paper, and they are creating as much money as a normal person will earn in their entire lifetime, because you may only pay your mortgage off just before you retire. And the second order effects of that are astonishing. That money is pumped into the system. Like I said, you could draw a direct line, unaffordability of housing, straight to the bank's ability to create that money. Fucking hell, if you're putting £100,000 deposit down and you're buying £1 million house, 900,000 new pounds are being created by that bank and pumped into the system at no cost.
Would you like a top up?
I think we should probably have a top up. I feel.
Do you know what the weird thing is? You finished that glass and I don't think you stopped talking and I haven't seen you pick it up. So there's some kind of voodoo going on there. Have you seen him pick that glass up and drink it?
I've not.
Yeah.
I quite like that.
It's really nice.
Oh, I'm pleased. It's
the first whiskey I've liked.
Oh, good. Well, it's the weird blend of the rye and the...
well, you might be a Scotch guy then.
I constantly have imposter syndrome around Bitcoiners who drink whiskey.
Do you?
Danny will have an old-fashioned or maybe...
I actually don't mind that. That's all right.
I love an old-fashioned.
Yeah. That's like me having a latte when you have a black coffee.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Black coffee maxi.
Okay. The counterpoint and counter-argument to that is credit, the opportunity to access credit, can drive productivity. That credit makes things available to people starting businesses, buying a home, being able to afford a home. So that is the counterpoint to that, is that a lot of credit has created productivity, and when credit dries up, economies stall. We've had a dry up of credit right now with interest rates so high. It's hard to... Now, look, there's a good side to that, because these shitty Silicon Valley startups who raise an enormous amount of money and end up IPOing before they've really made any money. Look at Twitter at the moment. It's worth 44 billion. It's still not profitable. Has it ever been profitable?
Well, Twitter's, I think the acquisition debt there was about 19 billion. So I don't know what the coupon on that interest is, but they're going to need to make a gigantic amount of money every single day in order to service that debt.
Isn't it $1 billion a year to service the.
Is that right?
It's
Wow.
or the interest on the debt. It's either to service the loan or the interest on the debt, which is why he's pushing so hard this Twitter
to
blue.
monetize it.
Yeah, which I've fallen for.
Yeah, $1 billion a year.
Yeah, $1 billion a
Fucking
year.
hell,
that's crazy.
Yeah. But yeah, so the good side is that yes.
That's true. I mean,
Yeah.
have you read Varoufakis' book, Letters to My Daughter?
No, let me keep an eye on that.
He's really interesting in credit. So he's got quite a nice story there where he talks about creditors pulling tomorrow's profits to be able to spend today in order to grow your business.
Yeah.
And to be honest, I think it's undeniable that there are benefits in that.
Yep.
I bring up house prices because I think that is a particular sector where the increase in prices has been disproportionate to the benefit to the general population.
Yeah, and one of the areas has been people with fabulous amounts of wealth knowing that they can't park it in the bank because they're not going to get the interest. So they might as well buy houses, which houses are another form of Bitcoin in some ways. They're a store of value. They always tend to go up in price. We're not building any new land apart from in the South China Sea. And so they are a good investment and they are a solid investment. And I mean, I don't have a second house, but I've thought of buying a second house. Is that a place to put money? And so you have this mass ownership of properties by landlords now.
Well, it's the financialization of everything that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
If your money is continually losing value by you sitting in the bank, you need to find other things to do with it.
What's the quote? When the Jeff Booth one?
Oh, when money isn't scarce, everything else is.
Everything else is.
Paraphrasing. but-
Paraphrasing, yeah. And so I mean, I think to me, it's. I mean, I remember growing up. There was an advert on YouTube for one of the old building societies, and it said 7.4% interest on your deposits. So whatever, so you can earn a high interest. So there's an incentive to save, which was obviously a good thing, and then there was a cost to borrow. And so whilst we've hit these 4 or 5% interest rates, which have scared the shit out of people, especially people who are going off fixed rate mortgages to variable rates, trying to renegotiate them, actually, historically, this is normal to have a cost of capital, which we should have. And I think it goes back to Stephen Lubka, doesn't it? Where Stephen Lubka talks about 0% interest rates. They distort the market. There should be a cost of capital.
Yes.
But it's the rate of change that's the problem.
It's the rate of, well, there's two problems. The rate of change out of 0% was really hard, and it's fucked a lot of things up. But going to 0% interest rates was putting off the inevitable market correction that's required.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a toss-up, isn't it? Would the pain of not dropping interest rates during those periods of general global crisis and calamity have been worse than the pain of the unwind? Both scenarios, I believe, are painful.
Yeah.
I'm of the view that we probably should have taken that first pain and not dropped to zero.
Boom and bust. It's an old it's economics 101. I studied boom and bust cycles. Ray Dalio talks about boom and bust cycles. You have a boom, you have credit expansion, then you have the correction, and you have credit contraction. And look, there are good times and there are bad times. But I think, and this is me from my uneducated point of view, I'd much rather Lynn Alden explain this, but from my simple point of view, is what I've seen is as we kick this can down the road, which I think is a problem of the political cycle. Nobody wants to lead us into a recession, but as we've kicked the can down the road, essentially what we do is we widen the wealth gap to unacceptable levels.
Between those who have assets and those who don't.
Exactly.
I mean, and returning to the liability point earlier, once you understand and acknowledge that all fiat money is essentially a liability either of your commercial bank or of your government, then the next conclusion is that reliance on the liability is all fine and well until you begin to lose faith in the person on whom you're relying, or the person who owes you that obligation. Commercial banking is an example. You deposit £100 into Barclays.
Yeah.
You don't own that money anymore. What you own is a claim on that money against Barclays. So you are a creditor of Barclays in respect to that £100. And we've seen very clearly over the last few months that as soon as lots of people suddenly realise that Barclays may not be good for that £100 anymore, out it comes.
Up to £80,000 you're protected.
Yeah. But do you really want to go through the ball ache of waiting for the government to reimburse you? No, if I can get my money out, I'm getting my money out.
Yeah.
That's how bank runs happen, as we all know.
Well, I don't know if you've prepared for it, but I have. I'm a financial prepper now. I have
Do you have 8 different banks or with?
no, but I have a couple of banks. But I also have pockets of cash distributed around the country, random locations, like really weird and random locations.
This is interesting. Obviously, I would never say that on a podcast, but I hope these locations are secure. And hidden
No. First, one, they're secure locations.
Is there a treasure map?
So no. Well, actually, my brother has a treasure map. But secondly, they're not amounts so large that it's worth coming around with a $5 wrench. I might as well buy the $5 wrench off you for $500. It's just small amounts of pockets. But if any time I need, I know I can go and get it. So if the bank closes down and I need cash, I'm like, there's that location. There's £1,000 there.
That's
it's a 2-hour drive, but I have to go and do it. So there's no point
Why not just have Bitcoin?
No, I have Bitcoin as well.
But why do you need the cash?
Because I want every scenario.
What scenario would there be that you need cash, not Bitcoin?
Going to the shops and buying a loaf of bread.
But this is like financial Armageddon prepping.
No,
bank failure.
Bank failure. A bank failure. I can't get any money out of the bank that day.
Yeah.
Truckers, I do something in the line of our business that means I get my bank account switched off. And that happened. People had their bank account switched off and they couldn't pay their mortgage. They couldn't get money out to buy groceries.
Yeah.
I think it's a far out risk that's getting nearer.
You're talking about tail risk.
Yeah. So
I'm obsessed with tail risk.
yeah. So I've got I'm just increasing my plans for every single one.
Yeah, I have 6 months of food in my basement and a generator.
Okay, so you're an actual prepper. Tin pineapple. You got a shotgun license yet?
I haven't got a shotgun license. I have some. Well,
I have some explosives.
I haven't.
Who needs a license?
Just for the record, and speaking as a lawyer, I have no explosives on my property.
Do you have a Rolls Royce, just in case?
Sadly, no. No, but tail risk is an interesting thing to explore, and I think it appeals to a lot of people who understand the value in Bitcoin. So, like we were saying about the UK, why is it so hard to explain to people in the UK why Bitcoin is useful? And I think in some respects, and Danny Scott is good on this as well, isn't he?
Yeah, great.
Coin again. We live in a country where we don't, in many cases, need Bitcoin yet. I'm being completely honest, and this is a person who loves and obsesses about Bitcoin much more than my wife is happy with. We live in a country where, by and large, you can tap your card in a point-of-sale terminal, and that works. And broadly speaking, technologies are adopted when and if they become useful. And for many people in the world, Bitcoin already is useful. It's a store of wealth. Your currency may be evaporating 70% a year. In Lebanon, you can mine Bitcoin and you have access to a global financial system that is permissionless and you can just participate in. In Zimbabwe, they're running out of physical currency now. So if you have you don't even need a smartphone, you can use a feature phone. Bitcoin Akazi, you have kids who are finally being able to get paid for services and not have the other 8 people who live in their rooms stealing the money from them.
Well,
to those people, is obvious.
This is what particularly pisses me off about someone like Elizabeth Warren with an anti-crypto army, which, by the way, most Bitcoiners are in an anti-crypto army. But what particularly pisses me off is she doesn't understand the second-order effects of what she's doing.
No.
She thinks of, in the USA, that she wants, for whatever reason, I don't know her intentions, but for whatever reason, she's taken it upon herself to attack Bitcoin. But she doesn't understand that this is a lifeline for people living under authoritarian regimes or activists around the world, people living under hyperinflation. The people living in Lebanon can mine Bitcoin and buy their groceries. She doesn't understand how important a tool this is.
No, but that's why I care. And I feel I judge myself a lot about this. I feel as though my wife says I come on far too aggressively about how brilliant Bitcoin is. So I think in some ways I need to dial back and start talking about the money instead, or about the benefits and about how exciting. My pinned tweet is at Elizabeth Warren. I don't.
My film coming out in the next week is called Dear Elizabeth.
Is it the Texas Mining one?
Yeah, we've delayed it by about a week.
I need to watch this.
And it ends with a letter I've written to her.
Oh, brilliant.
It should be out when this show drops.
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic.
Okay, so we've spent a long time getting to this point, but the real point is we've taken more of an interest in the UK recently, and that we've neglected it. You know, we're a media company that makes a Bitcoin podcast that cares about Bitcoin, that spends most of our time in the US because that's where a lot of the activity is. And in doing so, we've neglected it. I don't mean this as a flex, but it's, you know, we have one of the largest shows, maybe the largest dedicated to this subject, and it's in Bedford. It's from Bedford, UK, and we've neglected the UK. So we've been trying to build a relationship with Danny and Molly at Coin Corner, and we've been trying to build a relationship with British people. We're starting to put events on here. You know, we've got the football club. We're trying to do more here. But I feel like we're so behind the curve here in the UK. I fear legislation more than here, because at least in the US, there are some people, senators in Congress, that are doing something to fight and protect Bitcoiners there. And I feel like we've got lobbying associations, the Bitcoin Policy Institute,
Coin Center,
who are working to actually educate people on what this is and why it's important. And I'm fully aware that we're not doing anything here. Well, I'm not.
You're doing more than you think.
I
mean,
know.
I was fanboying at the beginning about how much I love the show.
But we could do, like, I'm giving you a layup to say.
Shall I give a bit of? I probably should have started at the beginning of the show with a bit of background. But if you haven't, you know, stopped listening to the show at this point,
the poshest show we've ever done.
am I really the poshest person you've had on the
You
show?
just sound posh, and you're making me speak posher, and my proper accent's a proper Bedford accent, mate. but I think that Americans will be like, these people are so posh.
So civilized.
British people are like, who are these fucking twats?
So I'm in 2-second potted history. So I'm a lawyer by training. I spent a long time working in M&A in the city. Started off in private equity, and then during the financial crisis moved into special situations. So a lot of insolvency and restructuring work. And then segued out of that, spent nearly a year looking after my kids while my wife was starting up a business. And then I wanted to work in startups and in fintech. And I've been interested in Bitcoin for a long time. I started reading about it in 2013, started node running in 2015, and have been working. I don't have a huge public presence. I'm generally quite a private person, and had been doing a lot in the background, as I imagine a lot of Bitcoiners do. And then I landed a job at a fintech firm called Curve, and we helped to put together their first cryptocurrency product. We were sponsoring Miami last year.
Yeah.
You may have seen we had a tent out in the food court.
Yeah.
So-
but I know another curve. Are there multiple curves?
Yeah, there's a DeFi curve.
Is there a gaming curve?
There may be. It's
So an old client of mine from my old days in advertising, a guy called Stuart Dinsey, works for a curve.
okay.
But I think they're gaming.
If they're gaming that. So Curve, the Curve I work for, I was saying to Danny earlier, they're basically a digital wallet with a physical card on top.
Okay.
And the idea is that you can provision whichever of your digital cards you want to act as the payment vehicle behind your Curve card. And the reason we were in Miami last year was because we'd come up with a crypto cashback. Unfortunately, I was not able to sway opinion at Curve that it should be a Bitcoin cashback. So,
God damn it.
I mean, mate, the amount of I basically had to get our CEO to wear a muzzle, not to have him talk about Solana at exactly. Anyway, so the basic principle, the selling point for Bitcoiners was you could earn cashback on your underlying cards, and also you could earn Bitcoin cashback on your Curve card, and that would just be provisioned into your wallet, and we've just enabled withdrawal to self-custody as well.
So that's available now. You have a card, you can get Bitcoin cashback.
Yeah.
Wow. I want that card.
I'll send you a referral link.
Yeah, please do.
Oh, awesome.
Well,
I'll show you after the show.
Well, I mean, I've got a BA Amex one, and my BA points, they're fucking so shit. I've got so many of them. There's a limit to how many you can use. They're always on shitty flights at shitty times that you don't want.
Never in the school holidays.
Never in the school holidays. Yeah, they're just a waste of fucking time. Like, I've got them there. They're just doing nothing for me. Give me sats, man.
I'll show you after the show.
All right, cool.
Anyway, sorry, Tom. I appreciate I've been burbling on.
How long have we been going?
We have been going for an hour and a half.
Bloody hell.
I'm so sorry. I
That's fine.
will
No,
try
it's
and
good.
be quicker. We haven't even talked about any of the law yet.
I know.
No, then will get me real hard on once I start talking about the law. Anyway, so I've been working at Curve for a while, and then as part of my work with Curve, I started to respond to a lot of the government consultations on cryptocurrency. So I submitted evidence to the FCA crypto sprint, which they held last year, to HM Treasury, to HMRC on taxation of crypto assets, and did a big piece of evidence to Parliament. So I'd begun to do some legal advocacy. And my main aim there is that I want to help politicians. Politicians, by and large, do not understand cryptocurrency and Bitcoin least of all. The current legislation, which we can talk about in a minute, I know you've got a few of the bills that are currently going through Parliament. A lot of those are not necessarily bad pieces of legislation, but I think some of them exhibit a lack of understanding of how Bitcoin works at a protocol level in particular. And once you begin to understand the protocol level, you understand that the legislation is perhaps not appropriate for what they're trying to regulate. So what I want to try and do is to ensure that politicians have the tools and education available to them to make good regulation. I'm relatively libertarian, but I'm also conscious that regulation is coming. And if it's inevitable, I want it to be good regulation. And I want it to be made by people who are informed and know what they're talking about.
Yeah.
So the pinned tweet I mentioned earlier to Elizabeth Warren, that was a game I played with my two daughters. Have you done that? We sat down with a coin. I put a 0 on one side and a 1 on the other, and we flipped it 256 times. Have you ever done this?
No.
It's absolutely fucking mind-blowing. You generate a binary number, 256 digits long, write that down, feed it into a piece of software that converts it into hexadecimals. You take that hexadecimal number, you feed it into another piece of software, and it spits out a private key. And then you put that private key into Blue Wallet, and then there's a fucking wallet there. And it just...
Danny, what's he talking about?
The process of doing that literally blew my fucking mind. And the one thing I couldn't get my head around was, before we'd written down that number, did it exist? Did it exist in the universe of potential numbers that exist within the search space of the Bitcoin elliptical curve cryptography? Or did we create that number? So what I did with my girls, okay, I've got a wallet, so I put some sats in there, and then I deleted the wallet. And I said to the kids, you've got to recreate the process of what we just did. You've got the binary string. If you can, Christmas treasure hunt, if you can complete that process, then you get the Bitcoin.
That's amazing.
That is very, very, very cool.
They did it.
Wow.
All I gave them was the websites they needed to go to put the numbers in. Seriously, it's just so much fun.
Yeah, I'm going to have to do this. Have you ever read the book about the Winklevoss twins?
The Bitcoin billionaires?
Yes.
Yeah. I love that.
The whole part where they're trying to come up with their private keys and the rolling of the dice.
With this air-gapped computer.
Air-gapped
I
computer.
wasn't air-gapped, I'm sorry.
Trying to avoid any scenario where there could be camera. Thinking that whole thing through, I blew my mind.
It's like I was saying earlier, the more I learn about Bitcoin, the more ignorant I realize I am. I mean, I got the idea from Gigi.
Okay,
One of his... And I think this gets into the impossibility of... So the legal reason for that story is the impossibility of banning Bitcoin. So when people say, oh, the government are going to ban it, so
They'll make it hard.
They will make it... They can make it as hard as they like. But at the same time, if I can sit at my room and generate a private key by flipping a coin, and then once I've generated that private key, I can transact with anyone in the world freely without any KYC. I mean...
It's unstoppable.
It's unstoppable. And I think once politicians realize that it's unstoppable, then we need to sit down and have a sensible conversation. This technology has been invented. It's out in the wild. You cannot shut it down. Let us see how we can use it to our advantage rather than to fight a fruitless fight against something you cannot win.
Yeah. Well, it's also in this time where we're post-Brexit, we have this opportunity to lead across Europe, and you occasionally see these little flirtations with it from within government. Yeah, we want to be leaders in fintech or crypto, and then nothing ever happens. I just think these fucking idiots are missing opportunity.
Well, do you want to talk a little bit about some of the legislation that's actually going through Parliament?
Please do. I mean, I've not looked at my notes once.
Please control me if I burble or if I...
Everything is fine.
Okay.
You carry on.
So I think the notes that I had. So a lot of this started with the Khalifa review, which was a review commissioned in order to look into fintech opportunities in the UK. And all that did was to say that we should probably come up with some laws to regulate this stuff. Fine. The two big pieces that we're working on at the moment are a response to the Future Financial Services consultation and a response to CBDCs. And by we, perhaps I should go into the big reveal,
Yeah.
which is that following the Bitcoin Collective conference in Edinburgh, and have to shout out to Jim Duffy and to Jordan Walker here.
Yeah, I
and
love both of
Lucy
them.
Rose Walker, brilliant guys.
Jordan's coming down on Friday.
Is he?
Yeah.
Oh, tell him I say hi.
Yeah. Jordan's a great guy. They're both great guys.
They were fantastic.
Yeah.
So I'd been doing a lot of advocacy and a lot of response to consultations, writing a lot of pieces. And then I reached out to Jordan after the conference. I wrote a piece for the Bitcoin Collective. And then Jordan got a bunch of us up to London to talk about maybe putting together a UK equivalent to the Bitcoin Policy Institute in
Which
the
is
US.
desperately needed.
We have something pretty much ready to go.
Okay.
And I think by the time this show airs, we should have a minimum viable product out there.
How do we help? How can we help? What can we do to support you?
Hopefully by having an ongoing relationship with us, which
That's
would be
done.
fantastic.
Well, that's already done. We're friends, so
Oh,
consider that done.
brilliant.
But how else can we help?
Well, shall I talk through a few of our
Yeah,
initiatives?
please do.
Some of our initiatives are academic and procedural in nature. So we're splitting our work, and by our, I'm talking about the loose collective of people that have come together after initial chats with Jordan and Jim. So the committee at the moment consists of some lawyers, tax experts, environmentalists, some miners. We're in touch with the guys at Skilling Mining, who are great.
The Irish guys.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I love them. And a podcast host from Canada who's a Brit. So we've got a wide variety of different skill sets, and we've split our projected activities into sort of three buckets. One is policy, one is mining environment, and one is education and next gen. So we want to try and focus on each of those three areas. We're all volunteers, none of us are taking a salary, so we're doing this in our spare time. And we're going to try and keep the running costs of the company as low as possible. And we're setting the company up as a not-for-profit, so any money the company does generate will be kept within the company to fund its activities. So taking them one by one, the policy side of things, the first pieces of work we're doing are responding to government consultations. And that's in the arena of what I was just talking about, making sure that decision makers and regulators have got good information about Bitcoin and about how it is differentiated from other centralized cryptocurrencies and why it should be considered in a different way. Secondly, on mining and environment, this kind of ties into how we might look to fund the enterprise and potentially somewhere where we might look to you for help. So like we were saying earlier, I think it's always more powerful to show someone something than to tell someone something. So we want to try and fund the company by initially setting up some geyser funding, not asking for donations as such, but we want to try and establish several different small proof of concept mines in different locations.
Are you aware of how much wind energy is curtailed here?
I had a meeting last week with someone who works on the wind farm just off Brighton, and he was talking about curtailment and how much of it he says he's sitting there and it's just shut up. It's producing far too much for the grid.
It's literal millions of pounds. I'm sure I saw something before, like it's like Christmas Eve or something, and New Year's Eve was like £9 million. I was like, what the fuck? I'll buy that from you. Yeah. I'll get some ASICs.
Cheap ASICs.
Do you know how much it's going to cost to operate this?
So we're doing some cost. So maybe starting at the beginning. So we're in talks at the moment with a landowner who has some hydropower on his land, and he's interested in putting some ASICs on that hydropower. So our first geyser fund is going to be, we're going to look to try and purchase 2 small ASICs and get into effectively a power sharing arrangement with him. So he can in some instances sell to the grid, or he can mine Bitcoin with hydropower.
When you say two machines as a proof of concept,
we're going to start with the 2 machines, but there's capability to build that out. Depending, if we raise enough money, we would put more machines in there. Secondly, we want to investigate proof of concepts on landfill methane, curtailment of wind and solar, and potentially socially useful uses for the waste heat generated by the machines.
But this is a commercial business. This should be a commercial business.
The reason why we're doing this is partly because of listening to David Zell and how much time he has to spend fundraising.
Yeah.
So our activities are not going to cost a huge amount of money, but they will require some time. And to the extent we want to pay fellows of the institute to write academic papers for us, we will need a source of income.
Have you spoken to Adam Wright?
Vespine?
Yeah.
Not yet, but I would love to.
Well, we can introduce you, right?
Yep.
I wonder if Iris can help with this at all.
Possibly.
You know, our new sponsor, Iris.
Iris Energy.
Yeah. So I wonder if I'll have a chat with them and see if there's any interest in that.
That would be amazing.
Yeah.
I just had a look and it was £250 million of turning wind farms off last year.
250 million.
15.
215. Oh,
Jesus.
I mean, I want to get ahead of you. I want to front run you and just say it's a commercial enterprise.
Listen, well, we want to have...
But you know what will happen if you approach some of these people, you're going to say, can I buy the energy from you? I will, you'll just dump it. I'll buy it from you, I don't know, 10 pence on the pound, whatever. I'll give you money for it that you're dumping. They'll probably be like, really? Okay, great. Yeah, I just want to put a data center there. Yeah, fine. What's in that? Bitcoin. Oh, no.
Well, we're early days.
Yeah.
And we need to map this out properly and put it into a business plan. The intention for the small mines is twofold. One, we want to generate like I say, we don't need a huge amount of income to run the company, but we want to be able to pay fellows for their academic work. We want to host their academic work on websites, and the company will have a few thousands of running costs per year. So with the mines, if we can do two things, firstly, we can generate a small amount of income to fund our advocacy. Secondly, I want to have a number of sites in the country that we can bring politicians to. So getting towards actual lobbying. I met Lisa Cameron in Edinburgh. I love her. She's got her heart in the right place. She is focused, for those who don't know, she is the head of the all-party parliamentary group in the UK who are looking at cryptocurrency. As you would expect, Bitcoin is lumped in with all other cryptocurrencies as well. Of course. I really struggle not to be mean about this, but I remember it took me a long time to understand why all other cryptocurrencies were pointless. And that's where they are at the moment.
Yeah. Didn't they just have some event in London?
I think they did, yes.
And they were covering CBDCs there, I think in a positive light.
Well,
And I think Lisa Cameron was criticised.
Interesting.
I think so.
Well, and I'm not surprised that governments like CBDCs. It's a brilliant excuse for surveillance, control, and confiscation.
Yeah.
Why would a government not like that?
Yeah, I love it. It's perfect.
It's brilliant. This actually highlights one of the problems we have. It's you have to tread very carefully the line of advocacy, because a lot of if you take what Bitcoin is to its logical endpoint, it is effectively not something that the issuer of a government currency would like.
Yeah, but my headspace isn't in that the end game is the end of government currency. That's not my headspace.
No, I agree.
Because I'm still in a place where I see that you will have sovereign currencies that sit alongside Bitcoin as a commodity currency, and but you will still have local currencies or some currencies adopting the dollar that will give you the difference between certain economies. It will be your fluid cash. But I think what it does is it makes central banks more responsible, and it makes governments more responsible.
Yeah,
I think it's a lens into the mistakes they've been making. And I mean, certainly in the midterm anyway, maybe long time I'm wrong, but in the midterm.
No, I agree with you. And then, we can use existing examples to support that view. Gold exists.
Yeah.
Gold is perfectly legal for you to hold as a British citizen, and you can hold gold and use pounds.
But pounds are more liquid, easy. It's hard to use gold as a currency, like a day-to-day transactional currency. Bitcoin is, arguably not as easy as digital pounds, but it's catching up.
I think that, sorry to segue slightly away from our
that's
advocacy work, but that's an interesting point. And do you mind if I spend a couple of seconds on that?
Do it.
So
polite. So the politest guest. Would you mind? Of course not.
It's because I was beaten at school. So can't beat a good caning next to the cricket pitch.
Definitely the poshest guest we've ever had.
Definitely the poshest guest we've ever had.
So on payments, I think Mark Morton at Skilling Mining is interesting on this. He says a lot of the advocacy work he now does focuses on the commercial benefits. And I think that's a brilliant idea. Like I said earlier, technology is adopted when it's useful. There's a reason you don't see cars with square wheels. when Bitcoin becomes obviously useful for people, it will be adopted. So one of the things I wanted to tell about was how absolutely absurd the current payment system is. So Peter, you go into Costa and you've got a bank card. You tap your bank card on the point of sale terminal, pay for your coffee, and then you leave. To you, that is a nice, simple process. What happens behind the scenes is an absolute sausage factory of different rent seekers. So ordinarily, what you've got there is a 4-party transaction. So you have yourself as the customer, you have Costa as the merchant, and then in between the merchant and the money actually getting to the merchant, you have an acquirer. So these are terms used in the payment industries. You have acquirer and an issuer, and then you have the scheme rules, which are Visa, MasterCard, Amex are the most well known. So you've left Costa quite happy with your grande latte, and then there's an obsessive sequence of messaging that is happening. So there are two things happening. There is messaging, and then there's transfer of value. So the point of sale terminal has frantically messaged your acquirer, and the acquirer has then messaged the issuer, which is the bank where let's say you use your Barclays card issued by Visa, and then the issuer frantically sends messages back to the point of sale terminal saying, actually, yes, Peter's got enough money in his account to pay for his coffee. It's okay, you can authorize that transaction. It's authorized, you leave, you've got your coffee, everything fine. Every single point and person on that chain is taking some money away from the merchant who sold you that coffee. So Visa and MasterCard's fees range between 1.5 and 3.5%, I think now. Amex's are even higher. And the acquirer gets a fee, the issuer of the card gets a fee. And the settlement, the actual money, doesn't transfer for some time later, in some cases days. And then if you contrast that with a Lightning transaction, there's 2 parties, possibly 3, because the node runner might take 1 or 2 sats. In a Lightning transaction, the money moves from you, Peter, to Costa, completely seamlessly, instantaneous, final settlement, almost for free.
Yeah, little fee taken by the miner.
Yeah, 1 or 2. I sat my Lightning node payments were one sat. I would charge.
It's obscenely cheap to do. It makes the entire process. I mean, if the Bitcoin currency was stable, it would be the best payment system in the world. Yeah. Well, it is the best payment system in the world, but like instability of currency does present issues. We can't avoid that.
That's true, but volatility is a price for being early.
Yeah, and do you know what? I was using Coin Corner this morning because somebody wanted to buy a ticket for our event, and I had to. They wanted to pay in Bitcoin, and I didn't have. I could have done it to a wallet, but I just wanted to have a proper transaction set up. So I phoned up Danny. I was like, "He set me something up quick," so I did it all, and then bosh, it's done. They paid Bitcoin.
I've obviously got a Bolt card.
Yep.
And
have you got a Rail Bedford Bolt card?
I haven't actually.
We've got some here. Do you want one?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I'll pay you for them.
You can have it for free.
So generous, thank you.
I'm curious, why did you need to speak to Danny for that?
Because I need the account set up. They still got to set up the KYC.
To receive payment?
Though? No. To get an account so you can create the invoice.
Oh, I see.
Yeah. So they still have to do the KYC stuff. But yeah, I mean, I could have just sent somebody my wallet, but what's happening, I'm sending them an invoice.
Yeah.
And at the time they choose to pay the invoice, then the value is the amount of sats they have to send is done at the time they go to pay. Whereas if I send them like, oh, here's an address, you need to send me this many sats.
Yeah.
It has a proper process to it.
How much time have we got left?
Just as long as you want.
Oh, well, happy days. So I think maybe to sort of wrap up slightly backtracking to the advocacy point, the third bucket that we wanted to focus on was next generation and education of like younger people. I mean, I'm slowly admitting that I'm no longer the youngest person in the room, so to speak. And
Papa Smurf just put his hand up. Danny's the youngest person in the room.
I mean, you started the conversation talking about ET. You can't be the youngest person.
No. I'll admit that. And so we're leveraging some of what the Bitcoin Collective team did in the past, and looking to ensure that we leverage as much of the previous materials. And there's a hell of a lot of good stuff out there. The Nakamoto Institute, the Satoshi Action Fund.
Yep.
we would look to ensure, and the Looking Glass stuff that's being done by Greg at the moment.
Have you got a name for it?
This may surprise you, but it's called Bitcoin Policy UK.
That's fucking brilliant.
I know, it took us a long time to come up with that name.
Do you have a relationship with the Bitcoin Policy Institute?
Only incidentally. So Margot has been working with our environmental team.
You should definitely talk to David Zell. Just have
We
a
should do.
conversation. And how much time has my brother spent talking to you?
So I've been messaging with brother in quite some detail, and then we had a really nice call about a month ago.
I can imagine he would want to help.
I mean, initially we went. So a lot of this started after October when we were speaking to the Bitcoin Collective team.
Yeah.
I reached out to Neil. Obviously, great to meet you in Edinburgh as well. Initially, I thought Neil might be keen to sort of spearhead it, but if he's able to stay and add advice and guidance and wisdom and so on, that'd be
Yeah,
really
he's
helpful.
definitely more on the. Yeah, I think he would like to be involved somehow, and he's brilliant. He's a resource. Use him.
Okay. I mean, so and like syncopating as much as we possibly can. Policy team are going to be doing a lot of written work. I say to my wife a lot of the time, I want to live in a world where Bitcoin is dull, where no one knows what they're paying with, and she says, well, "You've already achieved that for me."
Yeah, she's kind of right.
Yeah.
We think exciting. Everyone else thinks we're fucking nerds.
Yes, I'm happy to be in it. The reason I got involved in Bitcoin first was because I used to like building computers.
Right.
I'm a massive nerd. I'm very happy to be a nerd.
Well, listen, you have. Did you finish on that point?
Yeah,
Yeah. I mean, look, you have our full support. Anything you need, you have my number. You have Danny's number. Probably best to go through Danny. You tell us. I mean, the Bitcoin Policy Institute guys have been on our show a lot. We've had Margot, we've had Matthew Pines, we've had Zell on multiple times. We've had Troy. Like, we think these people are brilliant. They're at the forefront of ideas with regards to where Bitcoin should go, and they have our full support, and you have our full support. So anything you need, just stay in touch.
And if you come to the football on Monday, regulatory
come.
Jason might be there.
Can't come.
This
I'm
Monday.
flying. Oh,
You're literally flying on one game and returning on the other
so-
game and missing the event.
well, look, I'm very grateful for the offer of support. I feel I owe you more whiskey after this.
No.
This
but,
has been great, but I'm a little bit tipsy. 1 o'clock.
Well, we could help that perhaps by going beyond tipsy to the next level.
I have to do another interview.
Do you?
after
Oh
this,
God, I'm so sorry. Well, look.
Is there anything we've not covered you wish we had?
I think the only thing that I wanted to cover was one of the pieces of legislation which is
Yes.
coming. So, like I say, my long-term goal is to make Bitcoin boring and to ensure that you don't need to think about what you're paying with when you're paying with Bitcoin. And in that spirit, we can talk about a little bit of legislation. So the Economic Crime and Transparency Bill is currently making its way through Parliament. For people who aren't aware of how laws are generally made in the UK, bills will start off in the House of Commons, and then they'll move to the House of Lords, and finally they'll get royal assent. So it's broadly analogous to the two houses in the US, and then the president signing the bill at the end. So the Economic Crime and Corporate Transparency Bill is currently fairly far advanced, and there's a lot of provisions in there relating to seizure and freezing of crypto assets. I've read all of the relevant pieces, and I won't go into. I make quite a lot of notes here, but I won't go into detail here. I think the important takeaway for any Bitcoiner is that you should consider any sats that you have in a custodial wallet or in an exchange potentially subject to freezing or seizure.
If you've committed a crime or suspected of committed a crime, or just because they feel like they want to take it?
Well, that's the worry. If you've committed a crime, yes. But I think you need to be prepared for all eventualities. And if holding Bitcoin were to become illegal, then you have committed a crime by owning it. And that Bitcoin in your Coinbase wallet will then become subject to seizure and control.
Right. Okay.
So this I think ties into our third limb of the Bitcoin Policy UK efforts, which is we want to try and educate people on best practices. How should you use your Bitcoin? How should you preserve your privacy? How should you conduct yourself in an environment where all of your money may be subject to surveillance, seizure, or debasement? These are things that are obvious to a lot of people who've been in the space for a long time, but if you're just buying your first Bitcoin, they may not be very obvious to you. You may think it's fine to leave it in Coinbase or Kraken. The way that I won't go into detail on the provisions of the bill, but it's very clear that the government's going to have quite draconian powers if they suspect you of committing a crime of trying to get the exchange to freeze your account or confiscating hardware or software that they find in your home and appropriating the Bitcoin out of those wallets.
Right, okay.
So just as a general piece of, Gigi refers to this as hygiene.
Yeah.
In terms of internet hygiene, I think it's very important that we encourage the community to learn how best to use, control, and hold their Bitcoin.
Not your keys.
Yeah. It's a
Not
cliche.
your binary.
It's a cliche for a reason.
Yeah. Well, look, listen, this was great. If people want to find out more, where do you want them to go right now?
So our website should be live by the time the show goes out.
Okay.
That's bitcoinpolicy.uk.
Okay.
Twitter handle's easy as well. That's Bitcoin Policy UK, and same on Instagram as well. We will have a Noster. We'll put our NPub in our Twitter.
Great.
I don't tweet very much. But I'm at Freddie New. I either shitpost or I post about Bitcoin. So take your pick.
Well, listen, this has been great. Anything we can do to help, you let us know. I've really enjoyed this, and I think we should probably go and have a game of croquet.
I would love that.
On the lawn.
On the lawn.
It's a beautiful. Oh, maybe the last thing to say is if we don't have it quite set up yet, but we'll put our Giza fund onto our website. Maybe I can send it to you for the show notes
Yeah,
as well.
Yeah,
send it
definitely.
over. All right,
Awesome.
Freddie. Love this, man. Thank
I've
you.
loved it as well. Thanks so much for having me on. It's
Thanks,
been brilliant.
Brilliant. We'll do this again soon.
I hope so. Thank you.